Welcome to Hidden History of Rock and Roll with your host, Tiffany Scott. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Hidden History of Rock and Roll.
Hello and welcome to Hidden History of Rock and Roll. I'm your host, Tiffany Scott. If you are new to my podcast, I do a deep dive into the behind-the-scenes stories of rock's greatest legends, how they came to be, how the records got played, and maybe some dirty secrets if we are lucky. This is your all-access backstage pass. Today, I welcome another music industry legend. He is a music producer, songwriter, photographer, and recording engineer. He worked at both Stax Records and Ardent Studios as an engineer and producer, recording and mixing such artists as Isaac Hayes, Ike and Tina Turner, Booker T and the MGs, Eddie Floyd, Al Green, Rufus Thomas, Sam and Dave, Billy Eckstine, Otis Redding, and many others. He also produced and engineered recordings as by Joe Cocker, WattStax, Alex Chilton, Big Star, James Taylor, Leon Russell, Led Zeppelin, ZZ Top, Jason and the Scorchers, George Thorogood and the Destroyers, Joe Walsh, the Fabulous Thunderbirds, Molly Hatchet, Lenny Kravitz, Jimmy Buffett, Shakira, Crash Test Dummies, Shania Twain, Bryan Adams, and he also worked for a year out of the infamous Abbey Road Studios. As a photographer, he is most notably one of the last people to photograph his acquaintance, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., on the day before his tragic assassination. These are just a few of the people he has worked with. Please welcome to the show, Terry Manning. Hi, Terry.
Hello, Tiffany. Good to be here.
The phone keeps dropping, but somehow we will make it through this. Thank you for joining me today. And let's just give the audience a little history and start from the beginning of your career. How did you get into the music industry and what was your first job?
Wow, it seems like a while ago, but I'll remember it. I was living in El Paso, Texas, and listening to the radio and just loving the songs that I was hearing, and especially growing up to be a teenager, would listen to Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, Eddie Cochran, some of the cool stuff, the early rock and roll things that were on the radio. And in El Paso, while I was in junior high school, I started really liking an artist that was local, and his name was Bobby Fuller. And our class in school had a dance, and I heard Bobby Fuller's band was going to play for us at the dance. And I had never heard a live band before with drums and amplifiers and everything. I'd only heard songs on the radio, records I would buy. So I was so excited to go to this dance, and there was Bobby Fuller and his band playing. I was so excited. I went up at the end of one of their breaks and talked to Bobby myself. And I told him that for Christmas, I had gotten a guitar. I was probably 12 or 13 years old, something like that.
Wow.
I had gotten a guitar for Christmas, and I'd learned some chords, and could I sit in with his band? I could play with them. Of course, this was really audacious and kind of stupid thing to do. And he should say, "Kid, please leave me alone." But he didn't. He said, "Okay, son, let's try." Because after all, it was a junior high school class dance. It wasn't a big gig.
Wow.
But to me it was. So he gave me his guitar, a Fender Stratocaster, which I had never touched an electric guitar before in my life. Wow. Mine was a cheap Montgomery Ward's acoustic guitar. And he picked up the other guitarist's guitar and said, "Well, what do we play?" And I said, "Well, I've Peggy Sue by Buddy Holly." And he said, "Well, I know that. Let's play it." So I was standing there with Bobby Fuller in front of my junior high class. I sang, he played with me, and we did Peggy Sue for the class. So I was hooked at that point.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know. I started bothering him. He gave me his phone number, and he was such a gentleman, so nice. He never made me feel like I was bothering him or anything. I would call him up all the time. I would go to his house, which was, believe it or not, on Album Avenue in El Paso. I always thought that was amazing. So he had set up a really nice home studio for that era. This was in the early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go by there and just ask questions. Why are you pushing that button? What are you doing there? How did you write this song? What are you producing? What does that mean to produce? And he answered all my questions. He really became an official mentor for music. And that just, it all just filled my soul, with joy to be doing these things. So I started a band of my own locally once I moved out of junior high into the first year of high school. And several of the guys from the same school, we called ourselves Terry Manning and the Wild Ones.
Wow. And
we'd play not big gigs or anything, a couple of little parties in the neighborhood, things like that. And then so full of it all, I was so excited and heartbroken when my dad came and said, we're moving. I thought, oh my God, I'm moving away from where Bobby Fuller is and my band is and my friends in school and everything. And he said, but we're moving to Memphis, Tennessee. And I just, Memphis, Tennessee. Because I had bought at a place, early big lot type store, Walmart type thing. There was a place called FedMart. And I'd been going out to FedMart with my parents. And I bought single records. I couldn't even afford an album yet. But the first record I ever bought was Last Night by the Marquis from Memphis, Tennessee. Oh. And it was on the Satellite label, which later changed its name to Stax. Oh. And so I thought, I'm going to where Satellite and Stax are. There'll be record company there. And I was so excited. So we, sure enough, moved to Memphis. And but by that time I had gotten an electric guitar, a Fender Telecaster. And as soon as I could schedule it and work it out, I took my guitar to school, put it in my locker, kept it safe. And then after school, got on a bus and got as far as the bus would take me to Stax Records, and then walked the rest of the way with my guitar and knocked on the door, rang the bell, whatever. And sure enough, a very lovely lady answered the door. Yes, son, what are you here for? And I said, I'm here to play and sing and write and produce, and I'm here to do anything you need. And I've got my guitar with me. And she laughed. Her name was Deanie Parker. She had been a Stax artist and is still involved to this day with the Stax Museum, a very major player in the Memphis music and Stax music scenes. So she brought me in, sat down, talked to me for a few minutes, and then said, I think how old are you? I said, I'm 15, And she said, well, that's a little young. We don't really hire people that are that young so far, but why don't you go home and practice and come back in a couple of years and we'll see. Of course, I was, oh no, I'm being thrown out. And then a momentous thing happened that changed my life forever. I'll never forget it, and I'll always owe a huge debt of gratitude to the guy who walked through right at that moment. Good-looking, tall guy. I thought he was older, but he was just a few years older than me. But, when you're young, any age difference seems so much more than it really is. So this guy came over, said, what's in that case? And I said, that's my Telecaster guitar. And he said, well, I play a Telecaster. Let's sit down. So he sat with me on some chairs in the front entryway of the old Stax Records, and we played a few chords and talked a little. This guy was Steve Cropper.
Oh, gosh.
And he was the director for Stax. He was a songwriter. He was the guitarist for the Booker T and the MGs and the Marquis, my first record I had bought. And he offered me a internship type job. He said, can you copy tapes? And I've always said, if anybody asks and you do something, say yes, and then learn how to do it quick.
Yeah.
So I said, I did know some tape recorder stuff. My dad had a small home machine, but he took me back and put me to work in the Stax Records tape copy room. They would take tapes they had recorded in the studios and take them back to make copies for people, because we didn't even have cassettes, or certainly not CDs or MP3s or anything in those days. It was just reel-to-reel tapes. So if anybody wanted to take a copy home, or if we had to send a safety master to another country to release a record over there, you had to copy it. So after school, a couple of days a week, or here and there, I would go over to Stax and start copying tapes. And of course, I would sneak into the studios and watch what was going on and see what. Yep. And I really just, I think by watching Steve Cropper and Jim Stewart and the other engineers, Ronnie Capone, and people who were engineers at the Stax studios. And then it sort of just morphed into one day I got called in. Hey, you're in the copying tapes. Can you run the board for us and record this demo? And I went in there and sure, started pushing the buttons I'd seen people push. And they had told me a few things here and there. And pretty soon sound came out. I hit record. We made a record, or a demo record. And there I was, an engineer all of a sudden.
Wow. That is an incredible experience.
It's nuts, because that's by this time about 16 years old.
Wow. And
before I was 18, I'd even recorded songs that were on the charts. So start at 16 and a half, 17 years old, working with real professional artists in a professional studio with multi-track tape machines. Although we may have just had a 2-track at that time, I can't remember. But just to get a start so young like that was just incredible. And thank you, Steve Cropper, for being such a gentleman and helping me out.
I've heard wonderful stories about him from David Fleischman and my dad, John Scott. And I mean,
yes, indeed. David Fleischman, known as Flash, and had a band called Flash and the Casuals in Memphis. A great guy. He knew Steve well. And of course, your dad is a very good friend of mine. And I could tell how I met him if you wanted to go there now.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into that.
Okay, right around this very time, I got in a local band in Memphis called Bobby and the Originals. And we would go play gigs around the Tennessee area, Mississippi, Arkansas, the things adjacent to Memphis around there. And we had met a guy, we had a manager named Bobby Fisher, and he had taken a demo tape that the band had recorded to a guy named John Fry. Now, John had a home studio, although he had Ampex machines and Neumann microphones, real equipment, but at his house. And he was in love with sound and with records and everything himself. So we got to hang out with John Fry at his home studio, and we recorded a record. It was we changed our name by that time to Lawson and Four More, Bobby and the Originals. Bobby Lawson was the singer, so we became Lawson and four other guys, I guess. Lawson and Four More. And we were playing a show in Pulaski, Tennessee, the other end of Tennessee, the eastern end of it. And on the way back, we had some records with us. And everywhere we would drive and see a radio antenna, we'd try to pull over and try to see if we could get in the radio station and give them our record. And we came to Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, and there was the WDXE tower. And I said, guys, let's pull over. We were in our band station wagon hauling a trailer, pulled over, knocked on the door, nothing, knock, nothing. Kept knocking, and finally a guy came through who was the DJ there. Well, he was your dad, John Scott, in one of his early jobs. Yeah. And we went in and talked to him, did sort of a little interview, and he played the record. I don't know if he would even remember this, maybe, but we were all so young and just starting out. And Memphis, and within a few years, well, there he was in Memphis at WMC-FM, the top radio station there, and we picked it back up, and we're friends really for life. Your dad, of course, became one of the great disc jockeys, certainly in Memphis and in the world to me. But he semi-discovered and really broke in the United States acts like David Bowie and several other acts. So Tom Petty, of course, has the book about Tom out now. Mm-hmm. And it was just a great scene around Memphis to have the friends and association with all the DJs at FM 100, it was called. And it's just an amazing thing to look back as the music scene that was happening with Stax and High Records, with American studios, with so many great recordings being made and great radio stations and DJ friends. And gosh, I just can't believe what a wild, fun time it was.
So being a recording engineer and an artist at the same time, your career as an engineer kind of took off more than it did as an artist. Am I correct?
Yes, I, of course, wanted to be an artist, wanted to write and sing and play and all that. But I also really got in love with the engineering side of making records, the technical things, running the console, using the microphones, tape machines, all the equipment. So I apparently was doing a pretty good job of it. So I got over at both Stax and Ardent Studios when John Fry and put in a real, and got out of his home, and we put in a commercial studio for rent to the public in a building. So I was the first employee there, still working at Stax and then at Ardent, just back and forth constantly. So we had people come in from all over the Mid-South area, Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri, just all around. And I would engineer their records and things, still going in and recording my own things. In fact, I put out dare I say it, in 1970 or 71, called Home Sweet Home, licensed to the Enterprise label, which is part of Stax, one of the Stax labels that had Isaac Hayes on it as well. So I was still doing both things, but once you start getting paid to engineer and it's paying your rent, and later you get married and you have kids and you need to support everybody. And so I wasn't making a lot of money as an artist, but I was making a decent salary as an engineer at both places. So that kind of took over my life for quite a while. Engineer for many, many, many groups every day for almost from day one till today. It's just one of the main things I've done. So it took over my life, but it was a great thing to take over my life. And it turned into a group would come in and say, well, can you produce? Would you produce us? And I would go, well, sure. Yeah. So I would end up producing and engineering a lot of things. And then eventually labels heard about it and they would hire me to produce for an engineer on various labels. So it became an actual career of all those years now.
And, just off topic, did you ever come in contact with Elvis?
I did, actually. Not a lot, but one time I saw him. He would rent a movie theater called the Memphian that was there at the time, very close everything's close in Memphis, but anyway, he would go to the Memphian at night when it was closed, and he went for him and his friends and all. And one day I was walking down McLean Street that the movie theater was on, and here came Elvis driving up. So I watched him get out of his car and snap his fingers for a cigarette to be lit for him, and he was really the king. And it said, "Hi, Elvis," and he looked around and said hi. Well, then later, a couple of years after that, through friends because almost everyone in Memphis, especially in the music business, were friends. It was a real community. black people, white people, any religion, whatever, just friends because of the music connection.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said, "Hey, we're going out to Elvis's house. And just hang out. You want to go?" So I actually went out and got to go to his house, to Graceland.
Wow.
And went out to the racquetball court, which is behind his house.
Mm-hmm.
And there was at that time a piano at the entryway there. And Elvis sat down at the piano and was playing. And he plays well. I never knew that Elvis, was that good of a player on guitar and piano. But he played mostly gospel songs and sang. And just to sit there late at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe 3, something like that, to be sitting near Elvis with playing, that was pretty cool.
Wow, that must have been incredible. Yeah, my mom and dad both have funny stories with Elvis, and my dad was the candy guy at the Memphian, and he said,
"Oh, really?"
Yeah, he said Elvis came up and asked him. I want to say it was Raisinets, and he of course
sounds right.
Yeah, and of course he gave his famous thank you very much. And then my mom also, she climbed the wall, I think, one time at the Elvis estate and got kicked out, but it was memorable. But another thing I wanted to ask you about is Ike and Tina Turner. You got to work with them. What was that like?
That was very cool. Ike and Tina Turner in their early days, their early incarnation, I just loved the records they made. Ike was a true musical genius. He was the main instigator in what's known as, by many musicologists, as the very first rock and roll record, which would have been Rocket 88 by Jackie Brinston, was the name they put on the label, recorded at Sun Studio by Sam Phillips. But it had been put together by Ike Turner, had come up with the band. It was, I forget the name of his band, Ike Turner and the Somethings, but they recorded it, except he had the sax player, Jackie Brinston, sing it. And so it came out under Jackie Brinston's name. And that was, I think that upset Ike a little. But anyway, he came over to the Ardent studio, the original Ardent studio that John Fry had put in to add some horns. A lot of people came to Memphis to get horn sounds. The Memphis horns were great and well known with their own special style. So he came to get horns overdubbed on a live recording of Rollin' on the River, or Proud Mary, with the song that Creedence had, Creedence Clearwater.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the engineer and worked with Ike on that, and Tina was there also. Now, Ike, a lot of stories are out there about what a bad guy he was and things he did to Tina, and I'm sure a lot of that happened. I didn't see any of that. Mm-hmm. All I saw of Ike Turner in the studio was a very professional guy who knew what he was doing, knew what he wanted, was very kind to everybody, to Tina as well, who was there. She just sat and listened mostly, but he was producing it. And it was just a huge honor to me, even if it was just 1 or 2 songs from a live recording that we were overdubbing and then mixing, still to work with a guy that I idolized at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And a guy who was very different from a lot of the public persona that people know about.
That is a hidden history right there.
Oh, it is hidden history, right? Yeah, the phone cut out for a second there.
Yeah, it keeps cutting out. Where are you calling me from?
I'm in El Paso, Texas again.
Huh. I wonder what it's doing that. Well, I mean, Tina Turner is she's huge in my heart and just such a talented woman. And you watch all those videos of her just tearing it up. I never got to see her live, but I mean, it must have been, incredible to listen to her voice there in the studio, and just having them there, it must have been incredible.
Oh, it was. It's, I've talked a lot about Ike, but she is a tremendous artist. What a voice, what a persona she had, and an image, and just sparkled. And the movie was good too. What's Love Got to Do with It movie, I thought was very well done about their whole relationship.
Yeah, that was incredible. And then I can move on and talk about one of the things I mentioned in the bio called WattStax, which we talked a little bit about. But if you could tell the audience about what you did on that and the motivation behind it.
Yes, Watts is an area of Los Angeles. And many may not remember this now because it was so long ago, but in the probably late 60s or maybe very early 70s, there was a riot there, a big race riot, the Watts riots. And so that had given a very bad connotation to a lot of white people watching the news and listening to what was going on. Oh, those black people rioting in Watts. And at Stax, we didn't like that kind of thing. We were an island of racial harmony at Stax. It was just, it didn't matter what your religion was, what your race was, what sex you were, anything like that. It was all, Stax was all about talent, love of music, playing it, singing it, whatever. That's what Stax was. So everybody there was friends with everybody else, no matter what they were. Well, so Al Bell, who at the president of Stax, said he wanted to go out and put on a show that would do several things. One, of course, he would have all the Stax artists play the show, and that would be good promotion for the artists and the label. But even more so, he wanted to name it WattStax, WattStax. It's a Watts area of LA meeting Stax Records. So it became a concert in the Coliseum arena there, where the Rams played, and Southern Cal, I believe, played there. It's maybe UCLA too. I don't remember. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it was a big football stadium. So he rented that out, and he had the concert, sold tickets for $1 for an all-day concert featuring Isaac Hayes and all the Stax artists.
Wow.
And had it out there. Over 100,000 people bought tickets and came. I think it was close to 105,000 people in the stands, mostly black. I would say 99% black. Mm-hmm. And there's me, a still young white kid, who was put in charge of recording the music and then into a film that was to be made, and releasing and being the co-producer and releasing 2 soundtrack albums. So it was an incredible job. All those people there, I had hired the Wally Hyder live sound truck. So I would be the liaison between the truck and the stage, constantly going back and forth, running. It was the longest, hardest day of my working life. Probably it was such a lot going on, but a majority of it was directed by Academy Award winning director Mel Stewart. And it's a fantastic documentary movie and an incredible slice of racial harmony and life of the races in, I think it was probably 1972 or 3, something like that we did it, early 70s still. And the artists all sing and play in the film it's just fantastic. And it's still available. In fact, I believe it had a special Grammy release for it or something.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. I would love to watch that.
Highly recommended.
Yeah, I bet. That is incredible. And then moving on a little bit here, again, your bio is so huge. It would take me an hour to just tell everybody. But I'm also curious to hear about your dear friend, Dr. Martin Luther King, how you became associated, and then you getting to photograph him literally the day before his assassination. I mean, if you can just share with the audience a little bit more about that's an incredible story.
Yeah, that's quite a story, and I'll tell probably a lot more than you even want to hear. But Al Bell, again, the vice president at the time, later president, later owner of Stax, was a very good friend of Dr. Martin Luther King. In fact, Al had been one of the main leaders in the civil rights movement with Dr. King. But Al is an amazing personality. He's a very tall guy, very handsome, incredibly intelligent. and he's aggressive in a good way. And he's a big part of what made Stax, especially as it progressed and later on, and some things, good things and a lot of bad things happened to Stax business-wise. But he, because of that, Dr. King had told Al, "You're a little aggressive for me. Why don't you?" Al was also a DJ, so he said, "Why don't you stick with the music part?" So Al got hired and came down to Memphis to be a promotions man and one of the directors of Stax Records. Progressed within the organization quickly, but every time Dr. King would come through Memphis, he would come over to Stax. If we were in a session, he would just might poke his head in, and everybody, "Hey, good to see you, Dr. King," and whatever. So you'd see him walking in the hallways. He'd always go to Al's office, and they'd have meetings and talk and hang out and everything. So I wouldn't say I was a real deep friend of Dr. King or anything, but he would recognize me as we walked down the hall and say, "Hi, how are you?" Something like that. So an acquaintance, certainly. Well, one day, this would have been April 3rd, 1968, Al called me up at home. I had just bought my very first brand new car that I ever owned. I had the band van before and things like that, but I'd never bought a brand new vehicle. Bought a new Ford Fairlane, and I was so excited and happy with it. Al called me up at home, and he said, "Look, you've got that nice new car, right?" I said, Yeah. He said, "Well, can we use it? Would you drive it out to the airport?" And I said, "Yeah, what's going on?" So he said, "Well, Dr. King's coming in with Jesse Jackson and Ralph Abernathy and a bunch of the guys. There's a march downtown of the sanitation workers. So he's going to lead the march." And I said, "Well, yeah, I can go get him." Well, he said, "I don't want you to go pick him up." And he had several Stax people doing this, is just go out with your car and be a helper, be able to take the bags, or if anybody in the group needs a ride, take everything down to the Lorraine Motel. So several Stax people did that, including me. And as I was about to walk out of my apartment door, I looked over at a photographer. I was a photographer then. I'm a photographer now. It's the other thing I do, really, for real. So I looked over and saw one of my Nikon cameras sitting there. I said, "Man, I'll just take that with me." So I grabbed it, put it on my shoulder, drove out to the Memphis airport, parked right at the front, because then there was no, you could park anywhere. There was not even security back then like there is now to go through. But so I parked right in the front, went inside, was walking down the hallway, and there came Dr. King with a whole group of people. And so I just walked up and started walking with them. And they all knew me by sight. They wouldn't have said, "Hey, Terry, how you doing?" But, "Oh, that's the guy we've seen at Stax." So I'm just walking along with them, and I thought, "Hey, I've got my camera. They won't mind. I'll take some photos." So I took 13 photographs of Dr. King, and I was walking right next to him and holding the camera virtually in his face, as close as you can get almost. The pictures show the stubble on it where he'd not shaved that morning or something like that. They're so close. And walked along. All of a sudden, the news media comes charging up, interviewing with lights and cameras and everything, and I just kept taking photos. Then I went out, took a bag for a couple of the guys, not Dr. King, riding with me. We drove to the Lorraine Motel, let everybody off, and I went back to the studio. Well, that was midday on April 3rd, and in the morning of April 4th is when he was shot and killed at the Lorraine Motel.
Wow. And
so I was one of the very last people, if not the last, to take still photos of Dr. King, that close especially. That night now, before the assassination, but that night of April 3rd, there was a meeting at the a temple downtown. It's a church, a big church that was a black church at the time. They had a meeting, and everybody, it was packed. So I decided I'll go to that. but didn't take my camera for this, unfortunately. But Dr. King wasn't scheduled to be there. There were some other people speaking and talking about the march that was going to happen. And so I was standing right under where the pulpit was. Now, this church had skylights all around. In other words, skylights around the outside edges of the ceiling, not in the middle as so much. And it started thundering and lightning like crazy. And everybody was saying, "We want Dr. King. We want Dr. King." So they sent somebody over to the Lorraine Motel. He came in and he wrote a few words in the car, the story. And so he was going to do a speech, and he did the speech right there in that temple, in the church, extemporaneous. He made it up.
Wow.
I forget words sometimes.
Wow.
So this is the speech. I've been to the mountaintop. I may not get there with you. Second most famous Dr. King speech at all. And it was lightning flashing. So the lights were just going on and off, and the thunder was roaring, and he was speaking, and I was just within feet of him looking up, and I was just, I'll never, ever forget tonight. This is incredible. And then the next day, we get the call at the studio. He had been shot.
My God. What an intense experience.
It was incredible. And I know that's a long story, but it kind of takes it all, you know?
No, it really is. And on that note, I'm just going to pause really quick for an ad from Patreon.
If you are enjoying listening to Hidden History of Rock and Roll, please consider becoming a friend of the show on Patreon for only $5 a month. Your support will help deliver more excellent content. Plus, as a member, get your questions answered by the next legendary guest. Thanks for being the best part of the Hidden History of Rock and Roll.
Awesome. And so we'll take it up to a little brighter note, and we'll start talking about a couple artists that you work with that I'm really excited to talk about. I mean, we can only talk about a few. I mean, we can always come back and do more, right? You're available.
Oh, whatever. Absolutely.
I know you're a busy guy. So I want to talk today about Led Zeppelin and ZZ Top. So you worked on one album for Led Zeppelin, and it was the third album, and it was released in October of 1970. And how did you come about working on that album?
Another long story, so excuse me.
Bring it.
my band that I mentioned earlier that was in Memphis, it wasn't my band. I was a member of the band. Everyone was equal in the band. But Lawson and four more, we got a job from our man to be one of the opening acts on a Dick Clark's Caravan of Stars tour that would travel around the U.S. Now, we weren't on the Caravan, and we certainly weren't the Stars, but they would get local acts, small local acts to open up and play, a few songs before the big guys started coming on.
Wow.
So on this show, when I found out about it, there were the Yardbirds. And I thought, oh, the Yardbirds, they were one of my favorite bands.
Wow.
And so I couldn't wait to hear them, of course, and to see them, and especially to meet them. So as one of the bands, we got to be backstage, and I would go back and talk to them and hang out and just learn everything I could. So I'd become friends with some of the guys in like Jeff Beck and Keith Ralph and Jim in the Yardbirds.
Wow.
So when they came back for another tour, their tour, they happened to be playing a couple of shows kind of close to Memphis. I think it was Middle Tennessee State University, and then they played at Murray State in Kentucky. So I went to those shows, and when I got up in the last of those shows at Murray State, I was backstage and talking to the guys again, and Jimmy Page was there. And wow. But I said, where's Jeff? Where's Jeff? And Jeff Beck had just left the band, just had gone a couple of days earlier. quit, and Jimmy had taken over the lead guitar duties. So I sat down backstage with Jimmy for a long time. We played guitar together and just talking about different things. And when he heard that I worked at Stax and Ardent Studio, and he was so excited because he loved Memphis music.
Mm-hmm.
So he, at the end of that show, he said, now we're flying out of Memphis because there's no airport here. I said, yeah, nothing in Murray, Kentucky. But so he said, instead of getting on the band bus, are you driving back? And I said, yeah, sure. So he rode back through the night, several hours from Murray, Kentucky to Memphis, Tennessee. And when we got there, he said, I may as well not go to sleep. We're flying early in the morning. So I said, well, come on over to my studio. He said, okay. So I took him to the Ardent studio, got out my guitars and amps, and we just played and talked and everything. So he got to see that Ardent was a real studio with, top quality consoles, speakers, microphones, everything real. And he had been in it. So he knew of that. Mm-hmm. So several years later, when we would correspond as friends for years, he would send me the Led Zeppelin first album and second album on tapes or cassettes or whatever to say, what do you think? You like this band? It's a new one. And I said, yeah, I love it. And so then by the time they were one of the top groups, except the Beatles, probably the top group in the world already from their first two albums by the time of the third album. And he recorded it, tracked most all of the instrumentation, and had it like maybe 90% finished in England with a great engineer named Andy Johns, who is also his brother Glenn Johns is still a top engineer. But he didn't finish yet, and their tour for the third album was booked and ready to go. So Jimmy called me up and said, look, we can't finish the album, and the tour is supposed to support the album, and we've got to get it finished. Can I do it in your studio there? Do whatever we... And I thought real long and hard about it. Do I really want this band to come here? Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Of course, that's a joke.
Yes.
Of course I did. So here's one of, if not the top rock band in the world, not counting the Beatles, of course,
right?
Wanting to come to Memphis to my studio, John Fry and my studio, and work. So how we did it was they would be on their tour and playing shows. And then when there were enough days off between shows, 2 days or maybe 3 off between shows, Jimmy and his manager, Peter Grant, would fly to Memphis. I would pick him up at the airport. Peter Grant would have the tapes. We needed all the big multi-track tapes there. It was on 2-inch 16-track tape. So they would fly in. I'd pick them up at the airport, go straight to the studio, and we'd just start working, and usually work all night long, maybe 20 hours straight, something, whatever it took.
Wow. And
do all that we could. And then I drive airport, they'd get back on the planes, fly to the next show until a few days later they had another break between shows. And we had to coordinate, where these flights were. Was it Cleveland? Was it Cincinnati? Was it Dallas? Or, oh my gosh, putting it all together was tough. So we did this 5 or 6 times. Jimmy was always there. Peter was always there. And if any of the band members needed to do any little overdub thing, very quick overdub, they would come and we'd quickly do all that. Then when we had those done, we started mixing and mixed the entire album there on the Spectrasonics console at Ardent. And once it was mixed, took it over to a place called Mastercraft. And there was an excellent mastering engineer there. And with him, he and I mastered it with Jimmy's input to vinyl.
Wow.
Did several, I think we did 2 sets, A and B side, or side 1, side 2, twice in 2 different sets of it. Boxed them up, and then I drove the boxed masters to Nashville went and put them in the trunk of the car and drove to Nashville where they were doing the show and turned them over to their road manager, who got in a rented car and drove them to the pressing plant. Atlantic, the label they were on, never had heard it. They didn't hear a note. They didn't know what was going to be on it, anything. And so by the first time Atlantic heard it is after it was pressed onto vinyl records to be released.
Wow.
So that doesn't ever happen except for Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
But that was just quite an amazing experience. And with one of my good friends in music, Jimmy, that I'd known for years, it was just and Jimmy also became, along with Steve Cropper, John Fry, Bobby Fuller, Jim Stewart, some of the people I've talked about who were mentors in a way to me. Jimmy Page certainly was as well. And something else he did for me that I will never forget, just like the Steve Cropper incident, that what meant so much to me, my career, whatever. When they pressed Led Zeppelin 3, and probably know the cover, the album cover on it is a very expensive one, very intricate. It has the spinning disc that all the band's pictures would come up, and it was very expensive, hard to make album cover. So they had printed it all up. Jimmy got a copy, looked down, and they had left off my name as a credit. Oh. And he had given them, I said, my name as an engineer at Ardent Studio, Memphis, Tennessee. He really wanted that on there. Plus, he wanted the Memphis connection with Led Zeppelin. He loved Memphis music. So he called up Atlantic and had them destroy the entire batch of album covers that had been printed without my credit and made them reprint it with my credit on it. Wow. And boy, what a thing to do. I mean, he didn't have to do that. Yeah. But again, thank you. That means so much in the music business. At least it did, when you could get a printed credit on a hardware product like an album, a vinyl disc. So then, the millions and millions, since it was the number one album in the world, the millions of people buying it would see that name. And I started getting many more calls to be an engineer and then producer as well for some others, just because Jimmy did that. And in fact, to move ahead slightly in the story, a guy in Houston, Texas had bought the record, loved the sound, looked down and saw the credit of Memphis, Tennessee, and said, "Hey, I've got a band. It's called ZZ Top. Maybe he could work for me." So Jimmy led me to Billy Gibbons.
That was my next question. How did you know? That is unbelievable. It's amazing how one thing leads to another and to another, but that is incredible that he said to them, you know what, this has got to be a credit on the album. We have to add this, and they trashed it. So I'm sure everyone's going to be running to their albums and CDs and looking for your name and seeing that credit on there.
Let me mention one slight thing also involved in the Led Zeppelin album. Now, I think Atlantic may have left my name off of CDs when they did them, or maybe they didn't. I don't know. But one thing that we did, Jimmy was an aficionado of a guy named Aleister Crowley. Now, Aleister Crowley, I don't want to take too much of time for that, but he was sort of one of the first hippies or first beatnik kind. Very smart guy. He was an author. He was a mountain climbing champion. He was a chess champion, and he was a philosopher, which of kind of a hippie philosophy, if that makes sense. And Jimmy, he was quite an author, and Jimmy had all his books. In fact, had bought Aleister Crowley's house to live in Scotland and on Loch Ness. And so Jimmy wanted to have some Aleister Crowley sayings written on the inner groove of the vinyl albums. Because, once the album finishes and it kind of goes over toward the label, in that area, people would inscribe things. They would write the name of the number of the record, or the name of the mastering company, or various things. People put their initials in there. So Jimmy wanted me to write Aleister Crowley sayings on the vinyl disc. This would be the first pressings only, probably. So A side of the first set, I got the little, it's like a metal pen, like a pen or pencil, but it's all metal, and you can engrave sort of into the vinyl. So, or acetate it is actually. So I wrote, "Do what thou wilt," and then on the reverse side, "shall be the whole of the law." Now that's the most famous Aleister Crowley philosophical statement. Just be yourself, do what you want, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
"Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And then we used, on the second set, I did a couple of his sayings, and I can't remember exactly what those were, but I remember Jimmy, sitting there after they were written and joking. And I said, years later, somebody will be searching for both sets of this so they can have all these engravings. And they were laughing. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't you know it? People do that now.
Yeah.
The collectors go and look for these first edition vinyl pressings and to get the inscriptions that were written on there. So you never know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, it's true. And Ozzy Osbourne, I believe, wrote this song, Mr. Crowley, about that gentleman.
Yes, you're right. That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. That was, I was a huge Ozzy Osbourne fan. But anyway,
me too.
He was fun.
And I'll tell you one more. I'll say one. I actually was supposed to produce an Ozzy Osbourne album once.
Oh.
And before I was a fan and didn't really know what he did. And I met with him and Sharon, his wife, at Abbey Road and at their house. And we went talking through things. And I finally withdrew from the project and didn't produce an album on Ozzy because I had gone to the HMV record shop in downtown London, where I was living at the time. And when I saw the album covers with the blood and gore and crazy, I think, do I really want to be involved in this? And I could kick myself now.
Oh, no.
Because once I got into it's really good. I love Ozzy.
Ozzy's great. Yeah, my best friend growing up, Stephanie Douglas, her dad, Larry Douglas, was in the room when he bit the head off the bat. And so he would tell us stories at 13 years old, and we were just like, wow, we have to listen to that album.
So it really happened? It actually happened?
Oh, yeah. He was in the room when it happened, and it was crazy. The stories, my gosh, were insane. But so back to your time. That's funny that you didn't end up working with him.
I know. I'm so sad about it.
It would have been fun. But let's move on to the segue where you started and talking about ZZ Top. So you worked with them on their third album, again, a third album, Tres Hombres, which is where you started with them, I believe. And so yes. I don't need to ask you how you got to work with ZZ Top, but what was the experience like for you?
Well, I'll quickly say how met up, because as I say, Billy Gibbons, who is the leader of ZZ Top still to this day, the songwriter, the singer, the lead guitar player, had heard the Led Zeppelin 3 album and loved the sounds on it and really wanted to get that sound. So when they played a show in Memphis, he, no, this is so funny to me because just a little prior to that, I was back living in Memphis. I was driving home after a session late one night, and I think it was your dad on the radio. I think it was. And the DJ there on FM 100 played a song by a group I'd never heard before. The song was Sure Got Cold After the Rain Fell by a little band called ZZ Top. I thought, well, once I heard it, it's one of those times I pulled off the side of the road and stopped to concentrate on it. I love this. Who is this? Listen to that guitar. Listen to that voice. Wow. And that's one of their slow bluesy songs. Mm-hmm. So I started trying to look up and find out about ZZ. And ZZ is playing a show at a place called the Warehouse in Memphis, which is long gone. But some people, friends of mine, had gone to that show. I didn't go to it, but two friends had, and they were going up to the side of the stage and trying to talk to the band and stuff. And Billy had asked one of them, "Do you know a guy named Terry here that is an engineer?" And yeah, sure. So they hooked me up, gave him phone number, gave Billy a number, gave me a number, and hooked us up from me hearing it on your dad's radio station.
Wow.
Amazing coincidences.
Small world.
Little tiny small world. So Billy had their manager, Bill Ham, who controlled everything heavy-handedly, but rightfully so at the time. I didn't mean that in a bad way. Controlled the entire thing of ZZ Top, and he called up and said, hired me to come in and work at Ardent Studio, at their new studio when we put in the new location on Madison Avenue in Memphis, just down the street from FM 100. They came, and I just started working, and the very first thing we did was I just finished up one of the songs from their previous album, the second album, as a B-side of a single. And then I did a few overdubs and mixed the entire Tres Hombres of, ZZ Top. And it just sort of, it worked. Everything went so well. Billy loved it. I loved it. Bill Ham loved it. And we would jokingly used to call ourselves the triumvirate of three people in there making these records. I worked with them for 18 straight years in the studio on all of the big hit albums, because before Tres Hombres, they were selling pretty good numbers, but nothing major. And then with Tres Hombres, it just broke wide open, and they started selling huge numbers. And it just turned into an incredible friendship. Billy, I still talk to him fairly often. Saw him just recently. We'll see him again very soon. Working with him for, 7 or 8 straight albums. I don't know how many it was, but it just broke wide open at that point.
Wow. And 18 years, that's an incredible history. Do you have any?
Yeah, it is a long time.
Any more hidden histories you can share about, Billy or anybody there? Or?
Well, it's interesting. When we got to the album Eliminator, things needed to change. Billy came to me because the album, I forgot what was the name of that one, but whichever one had just come before, hadn't sold quite as much. And he was worried because, and I'll be frank about it now, because it's with the little old band from Texas, ZZ Top documentary that's been out on Netflix and theaters and other places. It's become known and talked about, and it's okay. But Frank, the drummer, Frank Beard, had been getting further into some substances that he was involved with, and had not been able to play as well as he had previously before he got into the problem areas. He was a tremendous drummer, is again now, thankfully, but he had some problems, and Billy was he said, I go to clubs in Europe, wherever I am, to disco clubs, dance clubs, and when they find out I'm there, as they often do as an honor to the artist, they'll play one of our records for the dance floor, He said, I've noticed when our record dance the way they do for these disco songs or Rolling Stone songs or other things, why aren't they dancing? And he said, I've decided it's the rhythm. So I would have to go to dance clubs, which I hate, and disco things. And I would start how many beats per minute, what gets people to stand up and dance. So we put together the Eliminator album to specified programmed beats that made people dance, or not made them dance, but they enjoyed dancing too. So Frank was actually removed from the session at some point because he just wasn't quite pulling his weight at that point. And I actually started using machines with samples and sounds that I had recorded and sampled and put together and made these sounds. And then I would program them so that they would be exactly on beat at the very beats we wanted. And when it came time to sequence the album, I actually started at a particular tempo, let's say 120 beats per minute. It may have been a standard now, but for dance. But then the next song, I would program it like a live show, where the next song on the second song in the album would be a beat faster. And then the third one, it would be a beat faster to sort of build the feeling and excitement. And then when a slow song, of course, you pull it back down and then build back up later. So it, through Billy's guidance and some demos that he had made, and so we got ready to make the album, made Eliminator a very different album to keep the blues influence, because they were a three-piece blues rock band. And suddenly there's synthesizers, there's horns, there's all these things happening, programming and things. And you don't want to offend your biggest fans that you already made, but you want to make lots of new fans. So we tried to marry the two things, the blues, Texas rock blues influence they had always had and been known for, mix them with the newer, more modern instrumentation, such as Moog synthesizers and things that would never have been on a ZZ Top album before. But because of all these things actually working, we went from selling just under 1 million on the previous album to worldwide over 20 million on the Eliminator. It's just insane.
And I think that was about the same time that MTV had come into fruition, about 1980, when that was going on. And ZZ Top had some incredible music videos that they made along with that album.
That's exactly right. It was like a perfect storm. I've always thought of the Beatles meeting George Martin was just a perfect storm. The best person in the world at the time on their instruments and in the studio happened to come together. And then with Led Zeppelin, the three best musicians and best singer in the world all happened to get together in one place and make a band. Wow. So this was kind of another perfect storm, because MTV needed video, needed what they today call content, which I hate the word, but we're making music, not content.
Right.
Anyway, they needed things to play. And so right at that time, out comes this Eliminator album with this incredible, different, new ZZ Top music, new and the same in one product, hopefully. And they got Tim Newman out of Los Angeles, who had been making some really innovative commercials for things like Levi's and maybe Apple, stuff like wouldn't have been Apple at that time, I guess, but really making very cool, modern, hip commercials. So Billy got with Tim Newman, who, by the way, is Randy Newman's cousin, and got him to come and make these videos that were just movies, small movies in themselves, plots going on with crazy things the band was doing, disappearing and making funny cymbals and playing furry guitars and stuff, just crazy things. And it all just came together at one time and drove it into insanity, really.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was the first time I was introduced to ZZ Top was via MTV.
Yeah. All of a sudden I would go on finally get a few days vacation trip or something. I'd go somewhere else, some other country. I remember being in the Cayman Islands once, and here came "Give Me All Your Lovin'" by ZZ Top over their radio. And I go, what island? And why are they? This is insane. So it just went worldwide. I went with the band to Donington in England to the racetrack where they had Monsters of Rock. It had a lot of big bands, and then all of a sudden they're up there announcing, and here they are, ZZ Top. And the fans were chanting, ZZ Top, ZZ Top. And I said, who's that? No, Z is what you say for Z in England. That's the first time I learned about that.
Oh, wow. That is incredible. I had no idea.
Billy looked down and said, don't worry about it. They're calling our name. It's okay.
Right. Yeah, they want us out there. Doesn't matter what they call us.
Yeah. Yeah, call us what you want. Just pay us. No.
Yeah. And did you say, I think it dropped, but did you say it was the Monsters of Rock tour?
Festival. I think it's called Monsters of Rock. They may still have it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at a big racetrack in the central part of England, north of London. I think it's called Donington. I know AC/DC was playing there, and Whitesnake, and lots of people, but huge festival.
I saw it.
So they're going from touring clubs in Texas to festivals all over the world there in a relatively short time.
Yeah. I mean, it was a fun festival. I saw it, the US Festival as well. But I mean, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit, but being influenced by all these incredible artists that you were around, you managed to do, your solo music. You must have been influenced by all these people.
Absolutely. Everybody I've worked with, I've enjoyed so much. It's been, and there's so many. I hate to even get into that. It's not like an ego thing or trying to promote myself. It's just the facts that I was there for thousands and thousands of sessions. I've probably done more recording sessions than anybody. I can't verify that, of course, and there are others who do lots of things. But starting when I'm so young, still doing it to this day, when we're through, I'll be mixing a new album on an artist I'm producing now. So it's just almost every day for so many years, it's gone on and on and on. But that you do learn from everybody. Now, sometimes you learn things you don't want to do. Why did he decide to do it that way? Okay, I won't do that, or whatever. But I've certainly been influenced by incredible talents. I'll take whatever abilities or talents that I might have and try to still just make my own music. And that's because I love it. It's because I want to do it. If it's ever sells much or if it's a hit or whatever, that's icing on the cake. That's fine. That's great. But I think most people in music do it more because they love it than for any other reason. So, I just have a brand new album that's just out, 15 songs, and each song on it is a tribute to somebody I've worked with or been associated with in music. I've got a couple of songs that are very ZZ Top influenced. In fact, one of them, Billy, is singing and playing with me on that song. There's one that's a tribute to a very close friend of mine, Carl Wilson from the Beach Boys, and his brother, Brian Wilson, who is also not as much of a friend, but an acquaintance. I do a cover version of Wouldn't It Be Nice, which is extremely brave, I must admit, to try to cover that song. But it's worked. It's worked really well. And I've got others with in the studio. I've taken influences they've kind of thrust into me and put them in songs on this new album. It's 14 original songs and only one cover, so quite a bit of work on it.
Well, that's awesome, and we're going to take a minute to listen to one of your songs. It's called "It's About Love," and we will let's just listen to that right now.
Hey man, don't get up, get down. show you how my love has grown. I'm gonna ask you to show me how. It's all right now. It's about love. It's all about love. It's about love, child. It's all about love. Just try to show it every day, but you need to know it in every way.
That was a great song. I absolutely love it. And then what we'll do is we'll have to add a link to your album on my podcast platform. But if
Great, thank you.
Yeah, if you don't mind, do you have any advice for anybody who's just starting out as an artist?
Oh my gosh. I was so lucky through my life and career to encounter some people like just Steve Cropper helping me. Why did he help me? I don't know. You know, he may have seen something. He may have just liked the fact that I had a Telecaster with me or that I didn't seem to be giving up. You know, I was there pushing. So I think meeting people, getting mentors is so important. I've run across so many people over my life that have taught me things. One guy I'll mention is a guy named Willie Mitchell out of Memphis, who was the producer of Al Green and Ann Peebles and some other out of his High Records label and the studio called Royal Studios. He would bring over the Al Green songs after he had tracked them, recorded them, everything just to mix. And I would sit with Willie and mix them. And I would watch him as this does relate to what advice I can give people. I would watch him as we mixed because he would say, it's not moving me yet, not quite moving me. And I thought, moving him, what's going to move him? So I would or bring the bass drum up or bring things around different EQs. And then that's moving. He'd start shimmying a little bit, shaking his body in time to the music. And I was thinking, there's an emotional side to this, not just the technical side. This is when I'm very young and just learning. And so he would say, yeah, it's got to hit you in the heart. It's got to thump you in the heart. And I'm, wow, these are things I'm a sponge absorbing all these things people say and that they do, other producers, other artists. You've got to be aware of what's around you, the people that are around you. Try to get into situations, but when you get there, you can't. I've had people I'd bring in as an intern where I was trying to help them, and I've had them sort of try to take over a session, put advice in, and I've had to take a couple of guys aside and say, look, you're not here to produce. You're not here to engineer. You're here to learn. And I don't mean to be mean about it, but you can't. I've had people go to the A&R guy who was out there on the session from the record label and try to slip him cassettes of their songs and things. Said, no, that's not why you're here. You know? So you get in a place as an assistant, at a studio around other people. You've got to know your place first and foremost, because you want their respect. You don't want them to wish you were gone. Mm-hmm. You know, you want them to go, this kid, this guy, this girl has something going for them. So it's hard to put it into words, right? But it's sort of like there's a totem pole or a hierarchy in any session. Whoever's the very top of that session, whether it's the producer or the person from the label or the manager, or maybe even the artist sometimes. But you've got to recharge. Where are they on this totem pole of abilities and jobs that we all have to do? And where am I on that? Oh, I see. I'm at the bottom. But also, you've got to know when to speak up when you absolutely have to. If there's a problem with a piece of gear and you see it sparking or happening, something's going wrong, yeah, speak up and say. But you don't do that if you just have an idea for their song. You know what I mean? It's right. It's knowing what hat you're supposed to be wearing and to wear it well. And there are a lot of good schools you can go to that teach engineering and production in music and technical things, how to fix things and all like that. Those are great, but nothing replaces being in sessions with people who know what they're doing and watch from them, learn from them, ask questions when it doesn't disturb the session. But get the indoctrination from a school, SAE or Full Sail or some of the different places that teach. Get all their information, but get to a studio if you can. Get with people who are doing something, that know what they're doing, and learn from them. So it's tougher today than ever, I think, because the music business is different than it used to be. It's not quite as much going on with the labels funding everything like they used to, but still, there's enough going on out there that if you can get in the right place, get a mentor, that's what's going to help you.
Yeah, and shout out to my engineer, Dean Springs. I'm going to move on to the fan portions because you have so many incredible stories. We are going long today, but it's worth it, every second of it. So the fan questions have come from people that you know, actually. First coming from my dad. I reached out to the big heavy hitters who know you. My dad, John Scott, he wants to know, what happened to the ZZ Top live from Ardent Studios broadcast from FM 100?
You know, I do not know the answer to that. As he's probably told you, we hooked up dedicated, they're called equalized 15K phone lines. That means that unlike a regular telephone, which we're talking landline phones, the old style phones, where those lines didn't have great fidelity necessarily, just enough to hear the voices properly. But for music, you needed to equalize them, make them get high frequencies as well as low frequencies, properly balanced. So we hooked up two lines for stereo, one left, one right, from our studio at Ardent over to FM 100, just down the street in Memphis. And your dad and I were the people responsible for getting all that hooked up.
Wow.
But we did concerts out of Ardent's A studio. We'd invite just a few, maybe 50 people invited guests, and they would play like it was a studio recording session, not like a live show, but mic'd up just as you would in the studio, but everyone playing as if it were a live show. And then you had an audience right in the studio room with the amps and speakers and musicians and everything enjoying it. So we did many acts. We did Leonard Skinner. We did the Groundhogs. We did Charlie Daniels. I'll leave people out. We did so many. And one of them was ZZ Top. But that tape has disappeared.
Oh, my gosh.
I have some of the others I had copies of around, but I do not know where that one went. And I'm afraid it may be lost forever unless somebody's lucky enough to find it somewhere. I looked through the Ardent, the tape vault, and I've never been able to find it there.
Wow, that is incredible. Well, hopefully someone will find it, and who knows what they'll do with it today.
Well, the Leonard Skinner one was lost for years, but it's now been found and is out, and it's great.
Oh, God,
and a great band to work with.
Love them. They were an incredible band. So I'll move on to the next fan question from David Fleischman, who we have already talked about a little bit today. He wants to know, in regard to Memphis and Memphis area artists, what would you say regarding George Klein's importance to the artists via the TV exposure he gave them on Talent Party?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, there were, for people who don't know, George Klein was Elvis Presley's best friend, school or junior high and high school maybe, and was, I think Elvis was the best man at George's wedding. They were very close schoolmates, and then through Elvis's career, he remained one of his very best friends, George Klein. Now, George also became one of the top DJs, early AM DJs on 56 WHBQ, which is the station that was the very first in the world to play an Elvis Presley recording. But George also got a TV show. Now, it started out, I think, called Dance Party, hosted by Wink Martindale, who later became a very famous game show host on all the networks on TV. And but when he left Memphis, George Klein took it over, renamed it Talent Party, and he would bring bands in from all over the Memphis area and give them exposure. So it meant so much to a band to be on, because everybody would watch Talent Party. It was the big deal on Channel 13, WHBQ, Memphis. And my band, several times, I know David Flash's band was on it several times. All the local bands got to play. And when they would get to be on the show and get to be seen by the kids all over not just Memphis, but the Mid-South area, boy, you could get jobs from that. In fact, our band manager became a guy named Harry Chapman, who was George Klein's friend and another DJ on that radio station. And boy, the calls would come in to management or to the band people or whatever. As soon as you were on Talent Party, you'd get to play for different high schools or junior high schools or parties and things. Mm-hmm. It was great. But George Klein really must be the biggest fan of Memphis music in history, as well as the biggest promoter or progenitor of Memphis culture and music. He was so good to people in music, such a lovely gentleman. He's sadly passed away a few years ago now. Mm-hmm. And I'll say one interesting thing to me about George. Mm-hmm. It's a huge regret as well as a good, but I was a kind of a not nasty, but a crazy punk kid. And our band were kind of the guys, the mischief makers in bands who were
I
around
don't
the
believe
Memphis
that.
area.
I have a hard time believing that.
Yes, I'm sorry, but I played a few tricks, at least 2 tricks on George Klein that I regret so much now. But one of the thing on our, we took the backs of our guitars and we made signs that said things, not nasty words that shouldn't be on TV or things, but I don't remember what it was, but crazy little sayings we'd put on the back of our guitars. And then when we could see the camera would be on his show. And if the camera were on one of us, instead of playing the guitar, we'd hold it up and flip it to the back. And that sign would come up and say something silly. And that's not what George wanted. So and then the worst thing I did.
Oh, no. There's more?
George every year would have a Christmas show where he'd have local bands and some big national bands sometimes too, acts on the show, all for charity, sell tickets, and have the shows often at the Ellis Auditorium downtown, where Elvis had played. All the bands played there at one time, national tour place. So once we were on, our band was on his show, and right in the middle of the thing, we decided maybe we were Pete Townsend of The Who or something, and we would throw the drum kit down, or I would smash a guitar or whatever, and I even got on the curtains, because they had curtains that would open, when the show would start. Mm-hmm. I even got on the curtains and would swing across like Tarzan on a rope or something on the thing across the stage. And I think our drummer even set a little fire on the stage or something. So, and George came out, and it gets even worse.
Oh, no.
George came out at the end of the thing, and I took a cane, put it around his neck, and pulled him off the stage.
Oh, my
like they used to do in vaudeville.
Oh,
and
no.
I'm so embarrassed now to have done some of those things. But years later, there was a 40th anniversary party at Ardent Studio, and I saw George there, and I went up to him and said, "George, I just have got to apologize for some of the things I did as a kid years ago, and I did them to you, and I'm so sorry." And he just smiled, laughed, looked at me, and said, "It's all okay. It was show business."
Aww.
And he was so kind, and I thank you.
Oh, that's so sweet of him. He didn't give you a hard time about it.
I know, and he could have, boy.
Oh, that's funny. That is so funny. Well, you try new things. They either work or they don't.
Yep.
And then I have one more from Pat Rayner. She asks, she says, "Please ask Terry to talk about the early days of Ardent and the impact John Fry had on Memphis music. The city owes him so much, and separately, how Ardent and Stax worked together."
Indeed. That's a great question, Pat. And John Fry was a wealthy guy from a wealthy family. In fact, his first partner in Ardent Studios was Fred Smith, who, after he left Ardent and went on to Harvard and got his business degree and started a company called Federal Express, he wasn't involved in Ardent anymore.
Just a little company.
So it's that kind of level of people, really well-off people. But John Fry wanted to do something for Memphis. He loved music. He loved Memphis. He gave studio time to so many bands, come in for free and just record and do whatever they wanted. Even that's partly the way I started, even though I was already an early friend of John's with Fred Smith and John King, another guy involved who was very, very important to Memphis music. Mm-hmm. And Fred Smith is still doing very well, running Federal Express and promoting so many charities and helping things. But sadly, John Fry and John King have both passed away. But John did so much. And he, for instance, when Stax got in big trouble, actually very big trouble, bankruptcy, and things just weren't working out, John would give Stax studio time, give the Barkays studio time for free, and just say, "Well, pay me when you can, if you can, but I know you've got to record." So he would do so many things for so many people. Big Star, the band that at the time was virtually ignored by the industry in the world, and has since become, because the music was so good and everybody involved did such loving and good jobs with what we were all doing there, it's now become influential bands in pop history, so-called power pop. But none of this could have happened without John Fry. And he was so intelligent, so smart, so loving and caring and giving that he was probably about half of Memphis music behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. Those are good questions.
It was, yes. All of them were.
Yeah, I knew I could count on those three for some good questions for you.
It's good to know I have three so-called fans.
Yeah, just a few. Well, now you're going to have a lot more because all these stories have been so incredible. And we've gone an hour and 30 minutes talking to you because I could go on, but I would love it if you could come back and talk about more stories if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I've got a lot of Lenny Kravitz stories. And I've got some Shakira stories.
I love
I've got
both
a lot
of them.
Love
both
Mariah
of them.
Carey
Yeah.
stories.
Those are, well, hello. We need a whole hour dedicated to that. But
everyone go out to Spotify or wherever and listen to the Red and Black album by me.
Yes. I can't wait for everyone to hear your album and hear your song. And it's a blast. It's been a blast having you today and learning so much myself. I mean, we could talk on and on and on, but I mean, I just can't thank you enough, Terry.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Tiffany. It's been a lot of fun reminiscing and to come full circle from meeting your dad at a station in a little town in Tennessee all those years ago. I won't even say how many. It's amazing.
Yeah, and now here we are talking, you and I. I was born, well, we won't even mention what year I was born, but I was just a little thing
in
when
Memphis?
You guys knew each other. Yes, I was born in Memphis.
Excellent. Good.
Yep. Came out here when I was with my parents when I was about 6. And I've been,
from Lawrenceburg.
No, yeah. We moved a couple places before Los Angeles, but this has been my home ever since. So.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you so much, Terry. I'm going to do the outro and I will chat with you soon.
Okay, thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the latest installment of the Hidden History of Rock and Roll. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on all the podcast platforms. Thanks for listening to the Hidden History of Rock and Roll with your host, Tiffany Scott.